Okay. So first of all, I would like to, it's a pleasure for me to be here, and I feel honored to participate in this panel, but most importantly, to listen and to learn more about the Black Lives Matter movement globally and what we all can do at Stony Brook and beyond. Peaceful demonstration took place around Italy a couple of weeks ago as Italians joined people in the United States and around the world in protesting racism and police brutality. Thousands of people took place in sit-in in Rome, Milan, Florence, Turin, Bologna, Naples, and other cities around Italy. Media representation and institutional responses did not acknowledge for the fact that many protestants were actually African Italians, and they whitened the protests. Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte did mention Black Lives Matter in a retweet of a Miley Cyrus tweet. And the leftist magazine L'Espresso talked about the Black Lives Matter protests with a cover featuring singers Trilli and Bugo, and it later apologized for not featuring Black protesters. I see Black Lives Matter in Italy, first of all, as a generational clash. In this period of pandemic, many articles written by journalists who were young in 1968 depicted millennials as weak, unable to protest against the limitations of freedom during the COVID crisis. An African-Italian millennial, Magda Gebremariam Tesfaye, wrote an article before the Black Lives Matter protests contesting this representation of youth and said that millennials, many of whom are actually the first generation, arguably the first generation of African-Italian born in Italy, because immigration became visible in Italy only since the late 1980s, are actually very politically active for intersectional struggles against racism. And the protests confirmed what she affirmed in this article. Anti-racist protests in Italy have been many throughout the years. So why so many people protested, for Black Lives Matter, and why there was such a resonance, this time, a mediatic resonance? Angelica Pesarini lamented that the media often presented the Black Lives Matter in Italy as a support to those who were protesting against police brutality in the US, without acknowledging police brutality and systematic racism in Italy. This is a strategy to other Black Lives Matter, to say that it's only an American thing. No, it doesn't really concern Italy. However, many people were killed just because they were Black in Italy in the last 20 or so years. The first racially motivated killing was the killing of, in recent Italian history, was the killing of a refugee, Jerry Maslow, in 1989. His funeral was actually televised in the state television, and it was a moment that really shocked the nation. 2020, actually, during the Black Lives Matter protest, there was actually another killing of an immigrant who protested against against the inhumane working condition to which he was subjected, Mohammed Ben Ali. It is interesting that the article in this slide came out during the Black Lives Matter protest, and it actually says the unacceptable death of Mohammed Ben Ali killed by degrado. Degrado in Italian means decline, neglect, decay. So there is an absence of naming even racism in this article. He wanted to denounce his boss. Other part of the protest also criticized the Democratic Party in Italy, which was criticized for supporting the American protests and dealing down in the parliament, and yet enforcing strict laws against immigration. support to Black Lives Matter was deemed to be hypocritical. And as the comic by Mario Biani shows on the bottom left part of my slide, there is a white man kneeling down, turning his back to an African man drowning in the Mediterranean Sea. Black Lives Matter and the legacy of Italian colonialism sparked a debate about colonial monuments. In particular, protested through some paint on the statue of journalist Indro Montanelli. Just to give you an idea about who Indro Montanelli was, I just would like to show you a short clip of him bragging in a 1970s TV program about what he did in Eritrea. And the person responding to him is called Elvira Banotti, and she was an Italian citizen born in the former colonies. The video has English subtitles.
Avete detto tranquillamente di aver avuto una sposa, diciamo, di 12 anni, e a 25 anni non si è peritato affatto di violentare una ragazza di 12 anni dicendo ma in Africa queste cose si fanno. Io vorrei chiedere a lui come intende normalmente i suoi rapporti con le donne, date queste due affermazioni.
No, signora, guardi, sulla violenza, nessuna violenza, perché le ragazze in Abissinia si sposano a 12 anni.
Lo dice lei.
Quindi lui era
su un piano di consapevolezza dell'uomo, insomma, il rapporto con una bambina di 12 anni è il rapporto con una bambina di 12 anni. Non se lo facessi in Europa riterrebbe di violentare una bambina, vero?
Sì, in Europa sì, ma lì no.
Sì, appunto. Quale differenza crede che esiste dal punto di vista biologico o psicologico anche?
No, guardi,
dal punto di vista del costume.
A 12 anni, non è questione, a 12 anni sposa.
Ma non è il matrimonio che lei intende a 12 anni in Africa, guardi, io ho vissuto in Africa, sì. Quindi il vostro era veramente il rapporto violento del colonialista che veniva lì e si impossessava della ragazza di 12 anni, senza assolutamente, ma glielo garantisco, senza assolutamente tener conto di questo tipo di rapporto sul piano umano. Eravate i vincitori, cioè i militari che hanno fatto le stesse cose ovunque, sono stati i vincitori, ovunque si sono presentati gli uomini, si sono presentati come dei militari. La storia è piena di queste situazioni.
Signore, vogliamo, non so se lei vuole istruirmi.
No, esatto, guardi, ho soltanto voluto chiederle per inciso come lei intende, dopo le due interpretazioni, come intende i rapporti con le donne.
Dipende da cosa ci si mette dentro,
dipende
anche da cosa le donne mettono dentro di noi, è tutto un gioco di specchi.
Cioè le vede sempre la donna in questa funzione passiva di adulatrice oppure di compagna, così che compare e scompare dell'uomo, ma non l'ha mai vista in una funzione diretta, attiva e diversa. Questo è un po' il dramma degli uomini della sua generazione.
Può darsi. Della mia generazione? Solo?
Credo.
Vabbè.
So throwing paint at Montanelli's statue can be seen as part of a broader contestations of the symbols of colonialism. Indeed, in the last 3 years, there have been many activists who actually changed the names of the streets in Italy named after or celebrating the Italian colonial enterprise. And indeed, in Palermo, the Via Indro Montanelli Street was renamed after his victim, Via Desta. If we still have time, I just would like to present very quickly a last example from my city. Which is an example of how perhaps we can or how the Black Lives Matter has rethought the symbols of Italy's racist past. This is Brescia, Piazza della Vittoria. The fascist regime in 1932 installed a statue called Era Fascista, a young white man which perfectly represents the ideals of racial purity of its political ideology. In 2013, the center-right administration restored the statue because it planned to put it back in the place where it was removed after World War II by partisans. However, the present administration of the center-right stopped the project, and this caused protests online. If we were to look at social media supporting the project to restore Piazza Vittoria, we can see that the main motivation of those who joined the We Want this statue back Facebook pages expressing their comments. They said, fascism is over, we are beyond ideology, art does not support any political ideology. However, when one looked closely at these groups, one could see that most of its members are sympathizers of neo-fascist organizations. So their alleged neutrality is fictitious. They are white supremacists. This confirms what Ruth Benguia was saying about the presence of so many fascist movements in Italy. The problem is not just the movement. Some of them are also, very beautiful and interesting, but the fact that every time these spaces are employed, they evoke fascist ideology. And so it is necessary to re-signify this space. On this note, the center-left administration of Brescia has attempted to re-signify Piazza Vittoria by asking artist and sculptor Mimmo Palladino to disseminate different statues in this piazza. Palladino's statue gave the piazza cubist a metaphysical flair, diffusing the fascist connotation of the piazza. He also created a black statue, Bigio, which changes the racial connotation of the ideal fascist youth. But a couple of weeks ago, a more important and impactful re-signification of this space took place in Piazza Vittoria. Protesters could choose many big piazzas to start their demonstration, but it was no coincidence that the Black Lives Matter demonstration in my town took place in this piazza, contesting the role that fascism and fascist colonialism still plays in the Italian imaginary. I see the Black Lives Matter demonstration as a spectacular history lesson, which has shown how racism has a fundamental role in creating Italy's national identity. Italy needs to come to terms with its own history of racism, whose legacy still affects the lives of so many Italians and immigrants in the present. The Black Lives Movement in the US started a discussion about this legacy in Italy.
Wonderful. Wow. Simone, bravo. Thank you so much for that. You packed a lot in there, and I appreciate it. I think the colonial, you kind of brought in the colonial questions that we were hoping to tackle, so that we were not without that context. I think